Greetings and welcome for all of you who are watching. You're tuned into TMH and this is our daily English news. Our headlines for today: Tigray Health Chief calls for unfettered access to medical supplies to meet the desperate need that's currently on the ground. Allegations of massive human rights violations in the Tigray region submitted in landmark cases against Ethiopia, and Meta is being sued for $2 billion over the Ethiopian violence and conflict still ongoing. Moving on to our main updates, Tigray Health Chief Dr. Amanuel Haile appreciates the promising start of the medical supplies provision to Tigray, but also calls for unfettered access to meet the desperate need on ground. Let's take a listen.
Aid started coming in since November the 15th. So in the last 1 month, slowly there has been change, really encouraging change, I would say.
The Bureau head emphasized that the medicines to treat cancer, mental health, and neurological patients have not yet made it into the Tigray region and that many are currently suffering from lack of access.
Patients with cancer, they have not received anything. If they need radiation therapy, they cannot go out of Tigray. And drugs for cancer treatment, they haven't been made available for more than 2 years now. So you can imagine the suffering, the pain that those brothers and sisters, mothers and fathers, children are going through. Drugs for chronic illnesses, non-communicable diseases like mental health issues, they are increasing in number, neurologic problems and kidney problems.
According to Dr. Amanuel, the Bureau head, only 4 international organizations, including UN agencies, have delivered medical supplies into the Tigray region and urged that all international NGOs do take their part in the delivery of health supplies into Tigray, as the demand is immense and continues to grow on a daily basis. Allegations of massive human rights atrocities and violations in Tigray submitted in a landmark case against Ethiopia. On Tuesday, Legal Action Worldwide, the Pan-African Lawyers Union, and the Du Bois Plimpton LLP submitted allegations of massive human rights violations to the African Commission on Human Rights and People's Rights against the state of Ethiopia. The submission, filed on behalf of the Tigrayan victims of the conflict in northern Ethiopia, follows the African Commission's October decision to indicate emergency provisional measures urging Ethiopia to seize all allegations of violence and violations, ensuring full humanitarian access into the Tigray region. Tuesday's submission, which comes just 3 days after Human Rights Day 2022, highlights devastating detail the widespread humanitarian rights violations that have been committed against Tigrayan civilians, including military airstrikes and artillery shelling targeting civilians, massacres and extrajudicial killings of unarmed civilians, including women, children, and the elderly as well. It also includes widespread and brutal sexual and gender-based violence against Tigrayan women, men, and children, often wielded as a weapon of war in order to intimidate and dehumanize as well. Systemic arbitrary detention and the torture of Tigrayan civilians on the sole basis of their ethnicity and attacks on critical civilian infrastructure such as schools, agricultural facilities, hospitals, and clinics, as well as religious and cultural heritage sites and personnel. Also included in the file are rampant anti-Tigrayan hate speech and propaganda that have been spread by the federal government and military officials, including Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed, a punishing power and communications blackout in the entirety of the Tigray region, which has prevented most communications between Tigray and the outside world for now 2 years, as well as massive forced displacement of people from the Tigray region, with civilians forced to flee their homes and even the country out of fear for their safety. The African Commission is responsible for promoting the rights contained in the African Charter on Human Rights and People's Rights, ensuring their protection in Africa. But when it seized itself on the landmark case on the 14th of October 2022, the Commission became the first human rights body to consider claims arising out of the armed conflict and humanitarian crisis within the country of Ethiopia as well. A U.S. diplomat bemoans the continued presence of the Eritrean forces. Ambassador David Shin, who served as U.S. ambassador to Ethiopia from 1996 to 1999, told Maqala Foresight that Tigray forces agreed to disarm, but that is contingent upon the Eritrean forces leaving Tigray and the ENDF replacing the Amhara militia currently in the western Tigray region. He said he doesn't see disarmament being completed until Eritrean forces completely pull out of Tigray.
Probably the most significant short-term factor that could interrupt the peace process if the Eritrean forces remain inside Tigray. If they were to leave and go back to Eritrea, then I would be much more comfortable in predicting a good outcome for the peace agreement.
Ambassador Shin also noted that unfortunately the U.S. has very little leverage over Eritrea and that the countries with some greater leverage on Eritrea like Russia and China are not helping efforts towards peace. He added that the U.S. can play a behind-the-scenes effort to help in the implementation of such agreements. Let's take a listen.
But I think that's the behind-the-scenes effort that will be important. The United States still is a major player in international fora. It has an impact in the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund, the United Nations organizations, and it will play a role there, either positively or negatively, to try to influence the implementation of this agreement. And you may not always see what the U.S. is doing in this regard, but I can assure you they will be involved and they will be engaged. I don't see very many other countries doing that or even in a position to do it. The European Union can to some extent, but you have to ask yourself, what are countries like Russia and China doing in this dispute? I don't see very much.
The ambassador said he has never been more discouraged about what is going on currently throughout the country than he has been over the last 4 years. Meta is being sued for $2 billion over Ethiopia's violence. Facebook's algorithm helped fuel the viral spread of hate and violence during Ethiopia's civil war, a legal case has alleged too. Abraham Ma'arag, who is the son of an Ethiopian academic shot dead after being attacked in Facebook posts, is among those bringing the case against Meta. They want a $2 billion fund for victims of hate on Facebook and changes to the platform's algorithm. The case, filed in Kenya's High Court, is supported by campaign group Foxglove, as Meta has content moderation hub in Kenya capital in Nairobi City. Hundreds of thousands of people have died in the conflict between the Ethiopian government and forces in the northern region of Tigray, with 400,000 others living in famine-like conditions. Last year, Ma'arag's father became one of the casualties of the country's violence. On the 3rd of November 2021, Professor Ma'arag Amara Abraha was followed home from his university by armed men on motorbikes and shot at close range trying to enter the family home. Threats from his attackers prevented witnesses coming to his aid as he lay bleeding, and his son says that he died lying on the ground 7 hours later. Before the attack, Facebook posts slandered and revealed identifying information about him, as his son says. Despite repeated complaints using Facebook's reporting tool, the platform left these posts up until it was far too late. One was removed about after his father's killing. Another, which the platform had committed to remove, remained online as of the 8th of December 2022. If Facebook had just stopped the spread of hate and moderated posts properly, my father would still be here today, said Ma'arag, and he wanted to ensure that no family suffered as he had, saying that a personal apology from Meta is necessary. In a sworn statement filed with the court, Ma'arag alleges Facebook's algorithm promotes hateful and inciting content because it is likely to draw more interactions from their users. He also claims that Facebook's content moderation in Africa is woefully inadequate, with too few moderators who deal with posts in key languages such as Amharic, Oromo, and Tigrinya as well. Meta, which owns Facebook, told BBC News, "We employ staff with local knowledge and expertise and continue to develop our capabilities to catch violating content in the most widely spoken languages in the country, including Amharic, Oromo, Somali, and Tigrinya as well." It maintains Ethiopia is a high priority, although less than 10% of the population uses Facebook, and says that the steps it has taken include reducing post virality, expanding violence and incitement policies, and improving enforcement too. This is not the first time that Facebook has been accused of doing too little to stop the spread of content promoting ethnic hate and violence within Ethiopia. In 2021, whistleblower Francis Hogan, a former employee, told the U.S. Senate the platform's algorithm was fanning ethnic violence, picking up the extreme sentiments, the division, and as those posts attracted high engagement while Facebook cannot adequately identify dangerous content, also lacked the sufficient expertise in many local languages, including some that are spoken in Ethiopia as well. Moving on to our final update for today. On that note, that concludes our news for today. Thank you so much for tuning in. Bye-bye.